In psychology, the Big Five personality traits are five broad domains or dimensions of personality that are used to describe human personality. The theory based on the Big Five factors is called the five-factor model. The Big Five factors are openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Acronyms commonly used to refer to the five traits collectively are OCEAN, NEOAC, or CANOE. Beneath each global factor, a cluster of correlated and more specific primary factors are found. For example, extraversion includes such related qualities as gregariousness, assertiveness, excitement-seeking, warmth, activity, and positive emotions. The Big Five model is able to account for different traits in personality without overlapping. Empirical research has shown that the Big Five personality traits show consistency in interviews, self-descriptions and observations. Moreover, this five-factor structure seems to be found across a wide range of participants of different ages and of different cultures. The five factors, a summary of the factors of the Big Five and their constituent traits, such that they form the acronym OCEAN, openness to experience. Appreciation for art, emotion, adventure, unusual ideas, curiosity, and variety of experience. Openness reflects the degree of intellectual curiosity, creativity and a preference for novelty and variety a person has. It is also described as the extent to which a person is imaginative or independent, and depicts a personal preference for a variety of activities over a strict routine. Some disagreement remains about how to interpret the openness factor, which is sometimes called intellect rather than openness to experience. Conscientiousness. A tendency to be organized and dependable, show self-discipline, act dutifully, aim for achievement, and prefer planned rather than spontaneous behavior. Extraversion. Energy, positive emotions, urgency, assertiveness, sociability and the tendency to seek stimulation in the company of others, and talkativeness. Agreeableness. A tendency to be compassionate and cooperative rather than suspicious and antagonistic towards others. It is also a measure of one's trusting and helpful nature, and whether a person is generally well-tempered or not. Neuroticism. The tendency to experience unpleasant emotions easily, such as anger, anxiety, depression, and vulnerability. Neuroticism also refers to the degree of emotional stability and impulse control and is sometimes referred to by its low pole, emotional stability. The Big Five model was defined by several independent sets of researchers. These researchers began by studying known personality traits and then factor analyzing hundreds of measures of these traits in order to find the underlying factors of personality. The Big Five personality traits was the model to comprehend the relationship between personality and academic behaviors. The initial model was advanced by Ernest Tupps and Raymond Crystal in 1961 but failed to reach an academic audience until the 1980s. In 1990, J. M. Digman advanced his five-factor model of personality, which Louis Goldberg extended to the highest level of organization. These five overarching domains have been found to contain and subsume most known personality traits and are assumed to represent the basic structure behind all personality traits. These five factors provide a rich conceptual framework for integrating all the research findings and theory in personality psychology. At least 4 sets of researchers have worked independently for decades on this problem and have identified generally the same Big Five factors. Tupps and Crystal were first, followed by Goldberg at the Oregon Research Institute, Cattell at the University of Illinois, and Costa and McRae at the National Institutes of Health. These 4 sets of researchers used somewhat different methods in finding the 5 traits, and thus each set of 5 factors has somewhat different names and definitions. However, all have been found to be highly intercorrelated and factor analytically aligned. Because the Big Five traits are broad and comprehensive, they are not nearly as powerful in predicting and explaining actual behavior as are the more numerous lower-level traits. Many studies have confirmed that in predicting actual behavior the more numerous facet or primary-level traits are far more effective. Each of the Big Five personality traits contains 2 separate, but correlated, aspects reflecting a level of personality below the broad domains but above the many facet scales that are also part of the Big Five. The aspects are labeled as follows: volatility and withdrawal for neuroticism, enthusiasm and assertiveness for extraversion, intellect and openness for openness intellect, industriousness and orderliness for conscientiousness, and compassion and politeness for agreeableness. Openness to experience. Openness is a general appreciation for art, emotion, adventure, unusual ideas, imagination, curiosity, and variety of experience. People who are opening to experience are intellectually curious, appreciative of art, and sensitive to beauty. They tend to be, when compared to closed people, more creative and more aware of their feelings. They are more likely to hold unconventional beliefs. On average, people who register high in openness are intellectually curious, open to emotion, interested in art, and willing to try new things. A particular individual, however, may have a high overall openness score and be interested in learning and exploring new cultures but have no great interest in art or poetry. There is a strong connection between liberal ethics and openness to experience, such as support for policies endorsing racial tolerance. Another characteristic of the open cognitive style is a facility for thinking in symbols and abstractions far removed from concrete experience. People with low scores on openness tend to have more conventional, traditional interests. They prefer the plain, straightforward, and obvious over the complex, ambiguous, and subtle. They may regard the arts and sciences with suspicion or view these endeavors as uninteresting. Closed people prefer familiarity over novelty. They are conservative and resistant to change. Sample items: I have a rich vocabulary. I have a vivid imagination. I have excellent ideas. I am quick to understand things. I use difficult words. I spend time reflecting on things. I am full of ideas. I am not interested in abstractions. I do not have a good imagination. I have difficulty understanding abstract ideas. Conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is a tendency to show self-discipline, act dutifully, and aim for achievement against measures or outside expectations. It is related to the way in which people control, regulate, and direct their impulses. High scores on conscientiousness indicate a preference for planned rather than spontaneous behavior. The average level of conscientiousness rises among young adults and then declines among older adults. Sample items: I am always prepared. I pay attention to details. I get chores done right away. I like order. I follow a schedule. I am exacting in my work. I leave my belongings around. I make a mess of things. I often forget to put things back in their proper place. I shirk my duties. Extraversion. Extraversion is characterized by breadth of activities, surgency from external activity situations, and energy creation from external means. The trait is marked by pronounced engagement with the external world. Extroverts enjoy interacting with people, and are often perceived as full of energy. They tend to be enthusiastic, action-oriented individuals. They possess high group visibility, like to talk, and assert themselves. Introverts have lower social engagement and energy levels than extroverts. They tend to seem quiet, low-key, deliberate, and less involved in the social world. Their lack of social involvement should not be interpreted as shyness or depression. Instead, they are more independent of their social world than extroverts. Introverts need less stimulation than extroverts and more time alone. This does not mean that they are unfriendly or antisocial. Rather, they are reserved in social situations. Sample items: I am the life of the party. I don't mind being the center of attention. I feel comfortable around people. I start conversations. I talk to a lot of different people at parties. I don't talk a lot. I keep in the background. I think a lot before I speak or act. I don't like to draw attention to myself. I am quiet around strangers. I have no intention of talking in large crowds. Agreeableness. The agreeableness trait reflects individual differences in general concern for social harmony. Agreeable individuals value getting along with others. They are generally considerate, kind, generous, trusting and trustworthy, helpful, and willing to compromise their interests with others. Agreeable people also have an optimistic view of human nature. Because agreeableness is a social trait, research has shown that one's agreeableness positively correlates with the quality of relationships with one's team members. Agreeableness also positively predicts transformational leadership skills. In a study conducted among 169 participants in leadership positions in a variety of professions, individuals were asked to take a personality test and have 2 evaluations completed by directly supervised subordinates. Leaders with high levels of agreeableness were more likely to be considered transformational rather than transactional. Although the relationship was not strong, it was the strongest of the Big Five traits. However, the same study showed no predictive power of leadership effectiveness as evaluated by the leader's direct supervisor. Agreeableness, however, has been found to be negatively related to transactional leadership in the military. A study of Asian military units showed leaders with a high level of agreeableness to be more likely to receive a low rating for transformational leadership skills. Therefore, with further research, organizations may be able to determine an individual's potential for performance based on their personality traits. Disagreeable individuals place self-interest above getting along with others. They are generally unconcerned with others' well-being, and are less likely to extend themselves for other people. Sometimes their skepticism about others' motives causes them to be suspicious, unfriendly, and uncooperative. Sample items: I am interested in people. I sympathize with others' feelings. I have a soft heart. I take time out for others. I feel others' emotions. I make people feel at ease. I'm not really interested in others. I insult people. I am not interested in other people's problems. I feel little concern for others. Neuroticism: Neuroticism is the tendency to experience negative emotions, such as anger, anxiety, or depression. It is sometimes called emotional instability, or is reversed and referred to as emotional stability. According to Eysenck's theory of personality, neuroticism is interlinked with low tolerance for stress or aversive stimuli. Those who score high in neuroticism are emotionally reactive and vulnerable to stress. They are more likely to interpret ordinary situations as threatening, and minor frustrations as hopelessly difficult. Their negative emotional reactions tend to persist for unusually long periods of time, which means they are often in a bad mood. For instance, neuroticism is connected to a pessimistic approach toward work, confidence at work impedes personal relationships, and apparent anxiety linked with work. Furthermore, those who score high on neuroticism may display more skin conductance reactivity than those who score low on neuroticism. These problems in emotional regulation can diminish the ability of a person scoring high on neuroticism to think clearly, make decisions, and cope effectively with stress. Lacking contentment in one's life achievements can correlate with high neuroticism scores and increase one's likelihood of falling into clinical depression. At the other end of the scale, individuals who score low in neuroticism are less easily upset and are less emotionally reactive. They tend to be calm, emotionally stable, and free from persistent negative feelings. Freedom from negative feelings does not mean that low scorers experience a lot of positive feelings. Research suggests extraversion and neuroticism are negatively correlated. Neuroticism is similar but not identical to being neurotic in the Freudian sense. Some psychologists prefer to call neuroticism by the term emotional stability to differentiate it from the term neurotic in a career test. Sample items: I am easily disturbed. I change my mood a lot. I get irritated easily. I get stressed out easily. I get upset easily. I have frequent mood swings. I often feel blue. I worry about things. I am much more anxious than most people. I am relaxed most of the time. I seldom feel blue. History: Early trait research. Sir Francis Galton in 1884 made the first major inquiry into a hypothesis that by sampling language it is possible to derive a comprehensive taxonomy of human personality traits, the lexical hypothesis. In 1936 Gordon Allport and S. Ode but put Sir Francis Galtoni unregistered trademark S hypothesis into practice by extracting 4,504 adjectives which they believed were descriptive of observable and relatively permanent traits from the dictionaries at the time. In 1940, Raymond Cattell obtained the adjectives, and eliminated synonyms to reduce the total to 171. He constructed a personality test for the clusters of personality traits he found from the adjectives, called 16 Personality Factor Questionnaire. Then, in 1961, Ernest Tubbs and Raymond Crystal found 5 recurring factors from the 16 Picard questionnaire. The recurring 5 factors were surgency, agreeableness, dependability, emotional stability, and criteria. This work was replicated by Warren Norman, who also found that 5 major factors was sufficient to account for a large set of personality data. Norman named these factors surgency, agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotional stability, and culture. And these factors are through which 5-factor consensus has grown. Hiatus in research. For the next 2 decades, the changing zeitgeist made publication of personality research difficult. In his 1968 book Personality and Assessment, Walter Mischel asserted that personality tests could not predict behavior with a correlation of more than 0.3. Social psychologists like Mischel argued that attitudes and behavior were not stable, but varied with the situation. Predicting behavior by personality tests was considered to be impossible. Emerging methodologies challenged this point of view during the 1980s. Instead of trying to predict single instances of behavior, which was unreliable, researchers found that they could predict patterns of behavior by aggregating large numbers of observations. As a result, correlations between personality and behavior increased substantially, and it was clear that personality did in fact exist. Personality and social psychologists now generally agree that both personal and situational variables are needed to account for human behavior. Trait theories became justified, and there was a resurgence of interest in this area. By 1980, the pioneering research by Tubbs, Crystal, and Norman had been largely forgotten by psychologists. Louis Goldberg started his own lexical project, independently found the 5 factors once again, and gradually brought them back to the attention of psychologists. He later coined the term Big Five as a label for the factors. Renewed attention. In a 1980 symposium in Honolulu, 4 prominent researchers, Louis Goldberg, Naomi Takamoto-Chock, Andrew Cumray, and John M. Dugman, reviewed the available personality tests of the day. They concluded that the tests which held the most promise measured a subset of 5 common factors, just as Norman had discovered in 1963. This event was followed by widespread acceptance of the 5-factor model among personality researchers during the 1980s. Peter Saville and his team included the 5-factor Pentagon model with the original OPQ in 1984. Pentagon was closely followed by the NEO 5-factor personality inventory, published by Costa and McCrae in 1985. Biological factors, heritability. Twin studies suggest that heritability and environmental factors equally influence all 5 factors to the same degree. Among 4 recent twin studies, the mean percentage for heritability was calculated for each personality and it was concluded that heritability influenced the 5 factors broadly. The self-report measures were as follows. Openness to experience was estimated to have a 57% genetic influence, extraversion 54%, conscientiousness 49%, neuroticism 48%, and agreeableness 42%. Age differences. Many studies of longitudinal data, which correlate people's test scores over time, and cross-sectional data, which compare personality levels across different age groups, show a high degree of stability in personality traits during adulthood. It is shown that the personality stabilizes for working-age individuals within about 4 years after starting working. There is also little evidence that adverse life events can have any significant impact on the personality of individuals. More recent research and meta-analyses of previous studies, however, indicate that change occurs in all 5 traits at various points in a lifespan. the new research shows evidence for a maturation effect. On average, levels of agreeableness and conscientiousness typically increase with time, whereas extraversion, neuroticism, and openness tend to decrease. Research has also demonstrated that changes in Big Five personality traits depend on the individual's current stage of development. For example, levels of agreeableness and conscientiousness demonstrate a negative trend during childhood and early adolescence before trending upwards during late adolescence and into adulthood. In addition to these group effects, there are individual differences. Different people demonstrate unique patterns of change at all stages of life. Another area of investigation is the downward extension of Big Five theory into childhood. Studies have found Big Five personality traits to correlate with children's social and emotional adjustment and academic achievement. More recently, the Five-Factor Personality Inventory of Euro Children was published, extending assessment between the ages of 9 and 18. Perhaps the reason for this recent publication was the controversy over the application of the five-factor model to children. Studies by Oliver P. John Ale with adolescent boys brought two new factors to the table: irritability and activity. In studies of Dutch children, those same two new factors also became apparent. These new additions suggest that the structure of personality traits may be more differentiated in childhood than in adulthood, which would explain the recent research in this particular area. In addition, some research suggests that the Big Five should not be conceived of as dichotomies but as continua. Each individual has the capacity to move along each dimension as circumstances change. He is or she is therefore not simply on one end of each trait dichotomy but is a blend of both, exhibiting some characteristics more often than others. Research regarding personality with growing age has suggested that as individuals enter their elder years, those with lower IQ see a rise in extraversion, but a decline in conscientiousness and physical well-being. A research by Cobb, Clark and Schurer indicates that personality traits are generally stable among adult workers. The research done on personality also mirrors previous results on locus of control. Brain structures. Some research has been done to look into the structures of the brain and their connections to personality traits of the FFM. Two main studies were done by Sato et al. And de Young et al. Results of the two are as follows: neuroticism negatively correlated with ratio of brain volume to remainder of intracranial volume, reduced volume in dorsomedial PFC and a segment of left medial temporal lobe including posterior hippocampus, increased volume in the mid-cingulate gyrus. Extraversion, positively correlated with orbitofrontal cortex metabolism, increased cerebral volume of medial orbitofrontal cortex. Agreeableness, negatively correlated with left orbitofrontal lobe volume in frontotemporal dementia patients, reduced volume in posterior left superior temporal sulcus, increased volume in posterior cingulate cortex. Conscientiousness, volume of middle frontal gyrus in left lateral PFC. Openness to experience, no regions large enough to be significant, although parietal cortex may be involved. Group differences, gender differences. Cross-cultural research has shown some patterns of gender differences on responses to the NEOAC and the Big Five inventory. For example, women consistently report higher neuroticism, agreeableness, warmth and openness to feelings, and men often report higher assertiveness and openness to ideas as assessed by the NEOAC. A study of gender differences in 55 nations using the Big Five inventory found that women tended to be somewhat higher than men in neuroticism, extraversion, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. The difference in neuroticism was the most prominent and consistent, with significant differences found in 49 of the 55 nations surveyed. Gender differences in personality traits are largest in prosperous, healthy, and more gender-egalitarian cultures. A plausible explanation for this is that acts by women in individualistic, egalitarian countries are more likely to be attributed to their personality, rather than being attributed to ascribed gender roles within collectivist, traditional countries. Differences in the magnitude of sex differences between more or less developed world regions were due to differences between men, not women, in these respective regions. That is, men in highly developed world regions were less neurotic, extroverted, conscientious and agreeable compared to men in less developed world regions. Women, on the other hand, tended not to differ in personality traits across regions. The authors of this study speculated that resource-poor environments may inhibit the development of gender differences, whereas resource-rich environments facilitate them. This may be because males require more resources than females in order to reach their full developmental potential. The authors also argued that due to different evolutionary pressures, men may have evolved to be more risk-taking and socially dominant, whereas women evolved to be more cautious and nurturing. Ancient hunter-gatherer societies may have been more egalitarian than later agriculturally oriented societies. Hence, the development of gender inequalities may have acted to constrain the development of gender differences in personality that originally evolved in hunter-gatherer societies. As modern societies have become more egalitarian, again, it may be that innate sex differences are no longer constrained and hence manifest more fully than in less developed cultures. Currently, this hypothesis remains untested, as gender differences in modern societies have not been compared with those in hunter-gatherer societies. Birth order differences. Frank Sulloway argues that firstborns are more conscientious, more socially dominant, less agreeable, and less open to new ideas compared to later-borns. Large-scale studies using random samples and self-report personality tests, however, have found milder effects than Sulloway claimed, or no significant effects of birth order on personality. Cultural differences. The Big Five have been replicated in a variety of languages and cultures, such as German, Chinese, Indian, etc. For example, Thompson has demonstrated the Big Five structure across several cultures using an international English language scale. Chung, Banda Vijver, and Leong suggest, however, that the openness factor is particularly unsupported in Asian countries and that a different fifth factor is sometimes identified. Recent work has found relationships between Jarthoff-Stedia unregistered trademark S cultural factors, individualism, power distance, masculinity, and uncertainty avoidance, with the average Big Five scores in a country. For instance, the degree to which a country values individualism correlates with its average extraversion, whereas people living in cultures which are accepting of large inequalities in their power structures tend to score somewhat higher on conscientiousness. Although this is an active area of research, the reasons for these differences are as yet unknown. Attempts to replicate the Big Five in other countries with local dictionaries have succeeded in some countries but not in others. Apparently, for instance, Hungarians do not appear to have a single agreeableness factor. Other researchers have found evidence for agreeableness but not for other factors. Relationships, personality disorders. As of 2002, there were over 50 published studies relating the FFM to personality disorders. Since that time, quite a number of additional studies have expanded on this research base and provided further empirical support for understanding the DSM personality disorders in terms of the FFM domains. In her seminal review of the personality disorder literature published in 2007, Dr. Leanna Clark asserted that the five-factor model of personality is widely accepted as representing the higher-order structure of both normal and abnormal personality traits. The five-factor model has been shown to significantly predict all 10 personality disorders symptoms and outperform the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory in the prediction of borderline, avoidant, and dependent personality disorder symptoms. Research results examining the relationships between the FFM and each of the 10 DSM personality disorder diagnostic categories are widely available. For example, in a study published in 2003 titled The Five-Factor Model and Personality Disorder Empirical Literature, a meta-analytic review, the authors analyzed data from 15 other studies to determine how personality disorders are different and similar, respectively, with regard to underlying personality traits. In terms of how personality disorders differ, the results showed that each disorder displays a FFM profile that is meaningful and predictable given its unique diagnostic criteria. With regard to their similarities, The findings revealed that the most prominent and consistent personality dimensions underlying a large number of the personality disorders are positive associations with neuroticism and negative associations with agreeableness. Education, academic achievement. Personality plays an important role that affects academic achievement. A study conducted with 308 undergraduates who completed the 5-factor inventory processes and offered their GPA suggested that conscientiousness and agreeableness have a positive relationship with all types of learning styles, whereas neuroticism has an inverse relationship with them all. Moreover, extraversion and openness were proportional to elaborative processing. The Big Five personality traits accounted for 14% of the variance in GPA, suggesting that personality traits make great contributions to academic performance. Furthermore, reflective learning styles were able to mediate the relationship between openness and GPA. These results indicate that intellectual curiousness has significant enhancement in academic performance if students can combine their scholarly interest with thoughtful information processing. Studies conducted on college students have concluded that hope, which is linked to agreeableness, has a positive effect of psychological well-being. Individuals high in neurotic tendencies are less likely to display hopeful tendencies and are negatively associated with well-being. Personality can sometimes be flexible, and measuring the Big Five personality for individuals as they enter certain stages of life may predict their educational identity. Recent studies have suggested the likelihood of an individual's personality affecting their educational identity. Learning styles. Learning styles have been described as enduring ways of thinking and processing information. Although there is no evidence that personality determines thinking styles, they may be intertwined in ways that link thinking styles to the Big Five personality traits. There is no general consensus on the number or specifications of particular learning styles, but there have been many different proposals. SMEC, RIBICJ, and Ramonnet defined 4 types of learning styles: synthesis analysis, methodical study, fact retention, elaborative processing. When all 4 facets are implicated within the classroom, they will each likely improve academic achievement. This model asserts that students develop either agentic shallow processing or reflective deep processing. Deep processors are more often than not found to be more conscientious, intellectually open, and extroverted when compared to shallow processors. Deep processing is associated with appropriate study methods and a stronger ability to analyze information, whereas shallow processors prefer structured fact retention learning styles and are better suited for elaborative processing. The main functions of these 4 specific learning styles are as follow. Openness has been linked to learning styles that often lead to academic success and higher grades like synthesis analysis and methodical study. Because conscientiousness and openness have been shown to predict all 4 learning styles, it suggests that individuals who possess characteristics like discipline, determination, and curiosity are more likely to engage in all of the above learning styles. According to the research carried out by CANOE, SMEC and Avedic, conscientiousness and agreeableness are positively related with all 4 learning styles, whereas neuroticism was negatively related with those 4. Furthermore, extraversion and openness were only positively related to elaborative processing, and openness itself correlated with higher academic achievement. Besides openness, all Big Five personality traits helped predict the educational identity of students. Based on these findings, scientists are beginning to see that there might be a large influence of the Big Five traits on academic motivation that then leads to predicting a student's academic performance. Recent studies suggest that Big Five personality traits combined with learning styles can help predict some variations in the academic performance and the academic motivation of an individual, which can then influence their academic achievements. This may be seen because individual differences in personality represent stable approaches to information processing. For instance, conscientiousness has consistently emerged as a stable predictor of success in exam performance, largely because conscientious students experience fewer study delays. The reason conscientiousness shows a positive association with the 4 learning styles is because students with high levels of conscientiousness develop focused learning strategies and appear to be more disciplined and achievement-oriented. However, The American Psychological Society recently commissioned a report whose conclusion indicates that no significant evidence exists to make the conclusion that learning style assessments should be included in the education system. The APA also suggested in their report that all existing learning styles have not been exhausted and that there could exist learning styles that have the potential to be worthy of being included in educational practices. Thus, it is premature, at best, to conclude that the evidence linking the Big Five to learning styles, or learning styles to learning itself is valid. Work success. It is believed that the Big Five traits are predictors of future performance outcomes. Job outcome measures include job and training proficiency and personnel data. However, research demonstrating such prediction has been criticized, in part because of the apparently low correlation coefficients characterizing the relationship between personality and job performance. In a 2007 article co-authored by 6 current or former editors of psychological journals, Dr. Kevin Murphy, professor of psychology at Pennsylvania State University and editor of the Journal of Applied Psychology, states, "The problem with personality tests is that the validity of personality measures as predictors of job performance is often disappointingly low. The argument for using personality tests to predict performance does not strike me as convincing in the first place." Such criticisms were put forward by Walter Mischel, whose publication caused a 2-decades-long crisis in personality psychometrics. However, later work demonstrated that the correlations obtained by psychometric personality researchers were actually very respectable by comparative standards, and that the economic value of even incremental increases in prediction accuracy was exceptionally large, given the vast difference in performance by those who occupy complex job positions. There have been studies that link national innovation to openness to experience and conscientiousness. Those who express these traits have showed leadership and beneficial ideas towards the country of origin. Some businesses, organizations, and interviewers assess individuals based on the Big Five personality traits. Research has suggested that individuals who are considered leaders typically exhibit lower amounts of neurotic traits, maintain higher levels of openness, balanced levels of conscientiousness, and balanced levels of extraversion. Further studies have linked professional burnout, neuroticism, and extraversion to enduring positive work experience. When it comes to making money, research has suggested that those who are high in agreeableness are not as successful in accumulating income. It is possible that these individuals are too passive and do not aspire to obtain higher levels of income. Nonhumans. The Big Five personality traits have been assessed in some non-human species. In one series of studies, human ratings of chimpanzees using the Chimpanzee Personality Questionnaire revealed factors of extraversion, conscientiousness and agreeableness as well as an additional factor of dominance across hundreds of chimpanzees in zoological parks, a large naturalistic sanctuary, and a research laboratory. Neuroticism and openness factors were found in an original zoo sample, but were not replicated in a new zoo sample or in other settings. A study review found that markers for the 3 dimensions extraversion, neuroticism, and agreeableness were found most consistently across different species, followed by openness. Only chimpanzees showed markers for conscientious behavior. Measurements. Several measures of the Big Five exist: International Personality Item Pool, NEOAC, Self-Descriptive Sentence Questionnaires, Lexical Questionnaires, Self-Report Questionnaires, Relative Scored Big Five Measure, 5 Labs, a Big Five personality trait visualization tool based on Andrew H. Schwartz's study Personality, Gender, and Age in the Language of Social Media, the Open Vocabulary Approach. The most frequently used measures of the Big Five comprise either items that are self-descriptive sentences or, in the case of lexical measures, items that are single adjectives. Due to the length of sentence based in some lexical measures, short forms have been developed and validated for use in applied research settings where questionnaire space and respondent time are limited, such as the 40-item Balanced International English Big Five mini-markers or a very brief measure of the Big Five domains. Research has suggested that some methodologies in administering personality tests are inadequate in length and provide insufficient detail to truly evaluate personality. Usually, longer, more detailed questions will give a more accurate portrayal of personality. The five-factor structure has been replicated in peer reports. However, many of the substantive findings rely on self-reports. Much of the evidence on the measures of the Big Five relies on self-report questionnaires, which makes self-report bias and falsification of responses difficult to deal with and account for. It has been argued that the Big Five tests do not create an accurate personality profile because the responses given on these tests are not true in all cases. For example, questionnaires are answered by potential employees who might choose answers that paint them in the best light. This becomes especially important when considering why scores may differ between individuals or groups of Euro differences in scores may represent genuine underlying personality differences, or they may simply be an artifact of the way the subjects answered the questions. Research suggests that a relative scored Big Five measure in which respondents had to make repeated choices between equally desirable personality descriptors may be a potential alternative to traditional Big Five measures in accurately assessing personality traits, especially when lying or biased responding is present. When compared with a traditional Big Five measure for its ability to predict GPA and creative achievement under both normal and OFA good bias response conditions, the relative scored measure significantly and consistently predicted these outcomes under both conditions. However, the Likert questionnaire lost its predictive ability in the faking condition. Thus, the relative scored measure proved to be less affected by biased responding than the Likert measure of the Big Five. Andrew H. Schwartz's study Personality, Gender, and Age in the Language of Social Media, the Open Vocabulary Approach represents the largest study, by an order of magnitude, of language and personality. The study analyzes 700 million words, phrases, and topic instances collected from the Facebook messages of 75,000 volunteers, who also took standard personality tests, and found striking variations in language with personality, gender, and age. Schwartz's research is a departure from many of the efforts that other researchers have made in that it uses data that was not taken specifically in order to determine personality. Criticisms: much research has been conducted on the Big Five. This has resulted in criticism and support for the model. Critics argue that there are limitations to the scope of Big Five as an explanatory or predictive theory. It is argued that the Big Five does not explain all of human personality. The methodology used to identify the dimensional structure of personality traits, factor analysis, is often challenged for not having a universally recognized basis for choosing among solutions with different numbers of factors. Another frequent criticism is that the Big Five is not theory-driven, it is merely a data-driven investigation of certain descriptors that tend to cluster together under factor analysis. Limited scope: one common criticism is that the Big Five does not explain all of human personality. Some psychologists have dissented from the model precisely because they feel it neglects other domains of personality, such as religiosity, manipulativeness, Machiavellianism, honesty, sexiness, seductiveness, thriftiness, conservativeness, masculinity, femininity, snobbishness, egotism, sense of humor, and risk-taking, thrill-seeking. Dan P. McAdams has called the Big Five a psychology of the stranger, because they refer to traits that are relatively easy to observe in a stranger. Other aspects of personality that are more privately held or more context-dependent are excluded from the Big Five. In many studies, the five factors are not fully orthogonal to one another. That is, the five factors are not independent. Orthogonality is viewed as desirable by some researchers because it minimizes redundancy between the dimensions. This is particularly important when the goal of a study is to provide a comprehensive description of personality with as few variables as possible. Methodological issues: factor analysis, the statistical method used to identify the dimensional structure of observed variables, lacks a universally recognized basis for choosing among solutions with different numbers of factors. A five-factor solution depends on some degree of interpretation by the analyst. A larger number of factors may, in fact, underlie these five factors. This has led to disputes about the true number of factors. Big Five proponents have responded that although other solutions may be viable in a single dataset, only the five-factor structure consistently replicates across different studies. Theoretical status. A frequent criticism is that the Big Five is not based on any underlying theory. It is merely an empirical finding that certain descriptors cluster together under factor analysis. Although this does not mean that these five factors do not exist, the underlying causes behind them are unknown. Jack Block, a unregistered trademark S final published work before his death in January 2010, drew together his lifetime perspective on the five-factor model. He summarized his critique of the model in terms of the atheoretical nature of the five factors, their cloudy measurement, the Modella unregistered trademark S inappropriateness for studying early childhood, the use of factor analysis as the exclusive paradigm for conceptualizing personality, the continuing non-consensual understandings of the five factors, the existence of unrecognized but successful efforts to specify aspects of character not subsumed by the five factors. He went on to suggest that repeatedly observed higher-order factors hierarchically above the proclaimed Big Five personality traits may promise deeper biological understanding of the origins and implications of these superfactors. See also, core self-evaluations, goal orientation, Exaco model of personality structure, Myers-Briggs type indicator, personality psychology, Sondhi test, trait theory, references. External links, International Personality Item Pool, public domain list of items keyed to the Big Five personality traits. Selection from the Handbook of Personality, Theory and Research for Researchers, video YouTube video showing the distribution of the Big Five personality traits on the world map.